You're about to hear how Britain is waging a full-scale war against Russia and why most people have absolutely no idea it's even happening. But stay with me until the end, because what this invisible war reveals about Britain's future power may shock you. This isn't a war of tanks rolling through London or air raid sirens echoing in Moscow. That kind of warfare is currently reserved for Ukraine. What's unfolding between the UK and Russia is a vast 21st century conflict spread across cyberspace, financial systems, undersea cables, and intelligence networks spanning 3 continents. And it's happening in real time. While you were scrolling through your feed this morning, Russian hackers were targeting British infrastructure. Just another day since this cyber offensive began in earnest back in 2022. As you commuted to work, MI6 operatives were in the field, conducting covert missions explicitly designed to counter Russian aggression and support Ukraine. And as you watch this video, Russian agents are almost certainly preparing yet another assassination plot on British soil, possibly the 21st attempt in just 3 years, according to MMY5.
This is not fiction. This is the new face of warfare, where nuclear deterrence has pushed adversaries into shadow battles, invisible to the public, but felt across everyday life. To understand how we got here, we must turn the clock back. The roots of this conflict lie in the historic tension between Russia and NATO, intensified since Vladimir Putin's rise to power in 2000. NATO's expansion into Eastern Europe, countries once part of the Warsaw Pact or the Soviet Union, was seen by the West as a path toward liberal democracy and collective security. But to Putin, it was a threat, a dismantling of Russian influence on the global stage. While NATO pursued peace through unity, Russia interpreted Europe's military complacency as vulnerability. Putin believed these soft spots could be exploited, and when Ukraine moved closer to the EU and NATO, he decided it was a step too far. The invasion that followed ignited a proxy war, Russia against Ukraine, NATO forced to respond in kind, with Britain among the most active participants.
Russia opted for a hybrid war strategy: cyberattacks, espionage, and economic disruption. In 2017, Russian military intelligence unleashed NotPetya, the most destructive cyber attack in history. Though it targeted Ukraine, the malware spilled across borders, causing over $10 billion in global damages, even hitting Russian corporations. It was proof that Russia could cripple global systems, and Britain was not immune. British infrastructure endures constant assault. The Star Blizzard operation, active since 2019, leaked sensitive UK-US trade documents during a key election. Russia's GRU has targeted British officials, disinformation watchdogs, and critical infrastructure. Their campaigns include spear phishing, credential guessing, and exploiting Microsoft Exchange vulnerabilities. These aren't just hacks, they're acts of war, and Russia hasn't stopped at keyboards. On British soil, there have been at least 20 plots involving military-grade nerve agents like Novichok. British towns have housed sleeper cells using spy gear hidden in ties and disguised as everyday items. Russian operatives now recruit British criminals, reducing sophistication but increasing deniability.
Meanwhile, MI5 and MI6 struggle with an asymmetric disadvantage. Russian intelligence penetrates British society more deeply than the UK can reciprocate in Moscow. But cyber attacks are just the beginning. The real, long-term damage has come from economic warfare. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Europe cut off Russian energy. At the time, Russia supplied 38% of Europe's gas and nearly a quarter of its fuel. In response, Russia weaponized gas exports, shutting off pipelines to spike prices and provoke panic. But Europe adapted, turning to Norway and the US. The UK's dependence on Russian energy dropped dramatically, but not without cost. By April 2022, UK household energy bills had spiked by 54%, then by another 27% in October. Average yearly bills jumped from £1,971 to over £3,500, with some estimates topping £5,000 in 2023. Inflation peaked at 11.1%, the highest in 4 decades. Even with subsidies, energy costs may never return to pre-war levels in our lifetimes.
In retaliation, the UK waged its own economic war. Imports from Russia fell 98.2% by late 2022. That's not a typo. Britain now buys more from Germany in a single day than it does from Russia in an entire year. Russia became the world's most sanctioned nation, with over 2,300 individuals and entities blacklisted by the UK alone. The financial pressure has been relentless. Britain froze over £25 billion of Russian assets, cut off 7 major Russian banks from SWIFT, and banned software and tech exports that power modern economies. Russia, now locked out of the global financial system, was forced to rely on aging ships, shadow fleets, and unstable alliances with China and Iran. Meanwhile, Europe continued relatively unscathed. And yet this invisible war isn't just about economics or espionage. The war in Ukraine has transformed Britain's defense doctrine. No longer content with peacekeeping, the UK is undergoing its largest military overhaul since World War II. Defense spending will rise to 2.5% of GDP by 2027 and 3% shortly after, injecting £13 billion annually into the armed forces.
The UK is developing a sixth-generation fighter jet, a hybrid war machine, where human pilots command drone swarms. The Royal Navy is investing in nuclear submarines and autonomous ships. British-made Storm Shadow missiles have devastated Russian bases, proving that UK weapons can punch far above their weight. And while America teeters on isolationism under Trump's renewed leadership, pressuring Ukraine into negotiations, cutting aid, and demanding European self-reliance, Britain has stepped up. Together with France, it is building a European-led coalition to guarantee Ukraine's future. Both nations now openly discuss assuming NATO's nuclear deterrence role, with France reversing decades of doctrine and embracing joint leadership. The numbers may favor Russia on paper, over 4,000 nuclear warheads compared to Britain's 225, but nuclear deterrence isn't about quantity. Britain's patrolling submarines can strike back even after a first attack, enough to destroy Moscow and St. Petersburg and force mutual destruction. That's the reality Putin must face.
Behind this resurgence is a Britain shaken by Brexit, limited by demography, and humbled by recent history, but also quietly resilient. It has pledged £18 billion in aid to Ukraine, maintains one of the world's top 3 financial hubs, and boasts intelligence services that remain the envy of allies and adversaries alike. So yes, Britain and Russia are at war, just not in a way that headlines scream or history books yet record. And in this shadow war of assassinations, economics, and cyber strikes, Britain is doing more than surviving. It's learning, adapting, and positioning itself as a modern power, one that could help define the 21st century more than anyone imagined.